of his children, with one on the way. Second mother is Miss Shania, Shenia. Last name Eldridge, Eldridge. She is a parent of two of his children.
And the first name is Shanae. That's his number.
Yes, and third is Dominique. Common spelling. Last name or first name is Dominique. Last name Keaton, Keaton. And she is a parent of one of his oldest child.
The parent of his oldest child. One oldest child.
Yes. And so when it looks like the rest are coming here, and then we'll start with a brief statement, and then take questions shortly after.
Thomas a junior?
No, he's a senior, but he has a son that's a junior.
Got it. No, before Shanae. No, before her. So Annie Harris.
Okay, so Annie Harris, the mother of four.
Nope.
No.
Annie Harris' grandmother.
Oh, no. Okay, after Annie.
Shiny Lindsay, parent of four, and one on the way.
Oh, okay. Lindsay, mother of four. Okay, I think I have the name on tape. And then Shania, mother of two. Okay, I think I got the rest. Okay. Thanks.
Some more. Scoot down.
All the way down, little one. All the way
Down, baby.
Scary, ready or sweetheart. We are still a bit confused about how many kids. Is it 9 or is it 8 kids?
There's eight.
Eight,
with
and
one on the way.
there's one on the way.
So there's 8 kids and 1 on the way.
And actually,
that's
Ms. Shake, the way that I spelled out for you earlier, would you like me to repeat that earlier? That I said earlier? Okay.
Okay, so
Because we have one plus one with you, and then there's two, and then there's one. Okay. Come on in front, kids.
Let the kids in front. Dominique, get in front with your brothers and sisters. In front with your brothers and sisters. Over there.
Okay, you guys, thanks so much for coming out. I'm just going to say a few words about Mr. Thomas. Of course, my office is conducting investigations as we speak. And we want to come out and say that this family has one unified voice, and these folks are the face of the case. We appreciate all the help and everyone bringing light to the case, and those folks protesting and supporting, we join them in the effort for transparency. However, these are the faces of the case, his children and his family, and we want you to know him. And we want you to know him through his family. His mother here is Miss Harris. Miss Harris is right here. I'm trying to get her closer to me. She is a matriarch and pillar of the community and resident of Pasadena and raised him since birth. And this is the name who he was calling when Pasadena PD was kicking and beating him to death. Let me say it again. This is the name of the woman he was calling when Pasadena PD kicked and beat him to death. So whatever, and I'll answer all your questions, Mr. Stallworth, but he called her mama. So if you want to go ahead and do a DNA sample and get down to the nitty gritty, she didn't give birth to him. She's not the biological. If you let me finish, I'll get to your questions. I love you all the time, but I want to get through this because she needs to get back home. She's been through a lot. Okay. She is his mother for all intents and purposes. And that's who he was calling when he needed help, after calling 911, who he thought would help him. And we're still investigating, and no matter what stories have been out there about this man, we want to make sure, and we're not going to portray him as an angel, but we're not going to stand by why anyone portrays him as a demon. He was not. He was a good man and a father and a loved relative. Okay? So Pasadena PD has a long history of having a heavy hand, especially when it comes to the black community. They've been riding rough for a long time. They need to be held accountable. We're not going to sit back and wait for them to give us answers. We're going to be aggressive and pursue answers. And we will have justice for JR, period. And we're not going to stand by and let them disintegrate his name into the dust. He had mental health challenges. We'll give you that. But just because someone has mental health challenges does not mean that you get a carte blanche to come and get rid of him with no questions asked or answered. We're going to question everything. Everything will be questioned. So, with regard to some of the 911 things, we want to dispel some of the things. There's a male's voice on the 911 tape. That is not an adult male. That is a 15-year-old child. Okay? And he is not the brother of the decedent. He is the 15-year-old child of Miss Lindsay, who was a witness to the kicking and to the beating. She saw this. And there are contemporaneous auditory witnesses who heard him being killed. While he was being killed, there were calls going out and coming in, and there are additional witnesses with additional evidence. And there were additional calls for help. Now, what we want the media to concentrate on, as opposed to, before I can start, exactly how many kids does he have? Well, look at his family. It's a lot. Even he touched a lot of lives. Okay, we want you to ask the question: when you have a whole police department, why do you have to pile on one man? Why can't you create a perimeter, surround him when he's not threatening anyone, and then take him into custody? Why couldn't you clear the apartment and then talk to him? They knew his name and they knew his status. Why couldn't you give him time and de-escalate? And just because Pasadena police says we use less lethal force does not mean they did not use excessive force. Hands-on can be just as lethal as a bullet. A boot to the head can be just like a bullet to the head if you keep kicking a man when he's down. They should have let the man live. And we're here to ask you to keep that theory in the media's eyes, to keep that out there. Now, we'll take a few questions, if you like. 36.
Terry, was he holding a knife?
He was not holding a knife. That's a rumor. And he had a knife underneath an armpit He never brandished the knife at toward the occupants of the apartment. He never threatened any of the children or his girlfriend at any time, or they would have said so. He was not a threat to him. They did not feel like they were in grave danger. And the standard for an officer is what would the reasonably objective officer feel, not what you would feel or what they would feel. What does a reasonable officer feel? Does a reasonable officer feel they need to use excessive force when there are 6 people there, they have guns, and a man is holding an extinguisher? Because after the first tase, he dropped the knife that was under his armpit. The second tase, he went down to the ground. Why not let him stay on the ground, secure the perimeter, and allow the man to live? Can we please give our black men a chance to live before we execute them on the scene? That's all we're asking. Yes, sir. I can't hear you, sir, and I don't think you're from the media. Can I have your question, ma'am? I'm sorry, you got to come close. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So you don't think the taser caused any sort of a heart attack or anything like that? You think the cause of death was beating?
I'm not a physician, and we're going to have independent experts, but I know from witness statements that he was kicked repeatedly about the head. Now, maybe taser caused some type of pain. It did cause him to go to the ground, but did a taser kill him? I think Pasadena police piling on him and kicking him killed him.
And was he restrained at the time?
He was restrained by the men on top of him.
Okay, but when did the restraining at the wrists and ankles happen? Because the way the sheriff's department told it, they said they used the taser, then he was restrained, he had some sort of distress, they removed the restraints and do CPR.
And you notice how that accounting left out the kicking and the beating with the baton? Can I mention that a baton was used? And maybe you can forward that information. And the sheriff wasn't there, and we appreciate them looking out for their brothers in arms. I was a police officer for many years, and I really appreciated having responding units cover me. But I'll have to say that I work with very good folks, and I work with some folks who maybe fudged it a little bit because of the blue code of silence. So the kicking, the beating, and the baton was a direct cause of his death, no matter what the coroner comes up with. Because, by the way, we're not going to see the coroner's report for a very long time because of this agency right here. It's not even done yet, but I guarantee you the Pasadena PD will have a hold on the coroner's report for a very long time.
And Mrs. Harper, it sounds like you have a lot of information as far as what went down on Friday morning. Can you give us a timeline and really kind of walk us through exactly what happened from the time that the call was made to the time that JR died?
Yes, there was some type of medical matter that Mr. Thomas was going through at the time he made the series of 911 calls to the police department. He believed that he was experiencing an emergency, and he thought the police could come and help him with what was going on in his world at the time. He called them, as he has done a number of times, and they're aware of, because they're computer-aided dispatch that tells them the names and addresses and things. When someone calls, they're aware of this person. So they responded, 2 units at first, with their flashlights and said, Mr. Thomas, please drop the knife. And he had his knife under his armpit. He was not brandishing it. Their guns were not drawn at that time, and we know that if he did have a nice knife in an aggressive manner, they would have come with guns out, right? Don't we believe that would have happened? Okay, so that.
I'll let you finish. Sorry.
Okay, so they sent one taser through his body. He dropped the weapon underneath his armpit. The second one, he went to the ground along with the extinguisher. Instead of securing a perimeter, they each began to pile on, and they were joined by responding units that kicked and beat him with a baton. One officer beat him with a baton. Other responding units kicked him about the head and body. He was screaming out in pain, heard by more people than Miss Lindsay. He was screaming out in pain, and his last screams were, "Mama, Mama," and then no other witness heard anything from him, and he stopped moving. Our witness investigation leads us to believe that the Pasadena PD, contrary to what they've said, did not perform CPR, that the responding emergency units performed CPR. They were the ones that did it with the machine. He was left for hours in a doorway. The children and his girlfriend had to go over his body, his lifeless body, to exit the unit. His children and his girlfriend had to climb over his lifeless body to exit the apartment complex. We assert that life-saving measures should have continued all the way to Huntington Memorial Hospital and not stopped to a licensed doctor pronounced him. The fact that they let him die in that apartment is more than negligent. It's actionable, and it needs to be stopped right now.
So are you saying that he was restrained at the time of the meeting or after?
Yes.
At the time of the meeting?
Yes.
Sherry, the Pasadena Police Department providing grief counseling and crisis intervention for the folks after the body was taken off?
No.
And how did that make the family feel in terms of they came to a mental health crisis and left a mental health crisis? So how is that affecting the children?
And you hear Miss Jessica, who is
Angry, frustrated.
very angry.
Just want justice.
I know. Wait,
And part and we're gonna have you. And part of the frustration too is that there are teams that are equipped with dealing with mental health issues. When you have someone mentally disabled, you don't want to go to the scene and go ahead and in your own mind put them out of their misery by killing them. You want to take a lesser, instead of having such an aggressive stance and then say, oh, but it was less lethal, we didn't shoot him. That's just not good enough. Less lethal is still deadly.
on that note, though, like you said, Mr. Thomas had been there, had called
Mental.
before. Had they treated him differently in other times?
Yes, they didn't kill him on the other occasions.
Right, but what did they do differently there? You know, did they talk to him? Did they bring counselors? Or?
They didn't bring counselors to the scene, but they spoke with him. They talked to him, and it you know what? It depends on sometimes in this town, Lolita. It depends on the officer that responded. If you're going to get, and we're going to check this, and part of what we want to assert is that these officers need to be tested. If you're going to test this man's body and have a toxicology report, why aren't those officers tested? You can't tell me that some of these officers are not on steroids, okay? Some of these officers, and we're going back, learning from the Kendrick McDade case, those officers should have been immediately tested for drugs and steroids, because it's my belief that some of them were on it. And we never had a test for it. We need to have these officers tested. They need to be segregated before they're questioned. They shouldn't be allowed to listen to the evidence against them before they give a statement. They should be treated like all of us are treated if we're arrested. If you're arrested right now, Lolita, you don't get to look at the videotape of you doing the crime. You get to get put in the room in there and interrogated until your eyes roll to the back of your head. We want that same thing to happen.
Are you saying that one of the officers who responded on Friday, one of the 6 officers, are you saying now that you think some of them could have been using steroids?
I don't know them personally, but I'm saying they should be tested. And wouldn't that be nice to have the evidence behind it? We need the evidence behind it. They're going to test his body for, and you're going to make, and guess what? All of you are going to write about it. If he smoked a joint last month, guess what you're going to lead your story with? He smoked that joint last month. He must have been under the influence. That led to him getting shot. How about the officers? I've represented police officers. How about them using narcotics and drugs? Why don't we get the test? Maybe they wouldn't be so quick to pull the trigger or to kick a person a little bit too much and cause them to die. We need independent drug testing, and we need independent prosecutors when we find they've done wrongdoing. And we don't want to have things that happen like the Michael Giannacco matter, where you're just finding out now about Kendrick McDade. You're finding out, and some people say, well, who's Kendrick? We don't want it to be a situation where we say, who was Reginald? Who was Reginald? Because they've killed, hasn't 3 people died this weekend? You can correct me if I'm wrong. He's going to get lost in the mix. We don't want that to happen.
Terry, prior to this incident,
Okay.
prior to this incident, in the other cases when law enforcement visited this young man, did he have, did he have any kind of weapon on him in the prior incident where there didn't appear to be any kind of scuffle between law enforcement and the individual?
Thank you for your question about his prior activity that didn't cause his death. And what I would like you to ask prior to this incident, how many black men did the officers kill before they came and killed him? Which officers were they? Which officers were they, and what are their records? So I'm happy to answer you about everything to do with Mr. Thomas. Since he's gone, though.
Your families have mental illness, right? How many? How many of your families have mental illness?
Mental issues.
You want them dead for the same reason?
I do, but hang on.
Speak out. It's not about being black. It's about being ill.
Okay, and emotions are running high, and high emotions call for drastic measures. We all have the same frustration that Miss Ronnie is feeling. Now, Miss Veronica is a cousin of Mr. Thomas, okay? And I will give you the information. I can't hear you because I have a guy here in this rag that's talking. Not yet.
Carrie, real fast, have you filed a lawsuit, and if so, what are the damages?
Not yet, but if anyone's familiar with the way my office works, we believe in getting answers quickly rather than shortly. So I foresee there being some type of filing across the street this week, and maybe something following that very shortly, to be honest with you, because we have witnesses that he was kicked while restrained. We have witnesses that he was hit with a baton while he was restrained, and we know that he is dead now, and that's enough to make a case.
So they have you're planning to file a claim.
Tactically,
you can say that. Sorry?
Do we know if the police department did anything tactically out of their own policy in arresting him or attempting to arrest him?
Okay, well, whatever the police policy that they decide is in their policy at the time, that's their policy because they're allowed to make that determination themselves. But I deal with federal laws and federal civil rights, so we'll try and keep it in that framework.
Is there video inside the house at the time?
We have independent witnesses and additional evidence, and we'll address that later as if there are any. I wouldn't exclude additional recordings. I wouldn't exclude it, but I'm not going to further comment on it. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie, right off the top, we wanted to clarify on the 911 call. So have you spoken to the family or the caller as to whether or not the statement made on that call about Mr. Thomas on drugs, whether or not that portion of the call is accurate or not?
Okay, and Mr. Nugent, right? Mr. Nugent, if you listen to the call, which you've only been presented with a snippet of the 911 tape, we would assert that there are many additional versions of the tape, and you haven't been presented with the entire tape. On that tape, you hear the dispatcher ask questions, and the young man is attempting to answer in the best way he can. It sounds like he's saying that he's Mr. Thomas's brother. He's not Mr. Thomas's brother. He's a 15-year-old minor, and I won't give his name. On that tape, I believe he's asked, has he been threatened early on? And he wasn't threatened, and then he was asked about has Mr. Thomas been violent. We believe that due to the activity going on inside, there may have been some confusion. So we're not resting the whole story on a child's perspective of stress. He was under stress himself. We're resting it on the totality of the circumstances. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and on Friday there were accounts that the body had been moved. Can you talk about those accounts? Was the body moved after he died? We do have that information, and we'll go into that detail a little bit later. But our concern is why wasn't Mr. Thomas taken to Huntington Memorial and continuing life-saving measures taken? If you dropped right now, sir, and someone got to you while you're still warm, you don't even have to have a pulse. They would work on you. Someone would jump on the stretcher and keep pumping CPR, life-saving methods into your body until you're down the street at Huntington. Why didn't he get that same justice? Why not? It wouldn't have cost the taxpayers that much more. Did we really want to let him die on the scene? Maybe that's an answer we should know.
What is the mental health issue?
And I know that you want that, but he needed help, and we'll leave it there, and I'll fill that in later. But we don't want the story to center on his entire health.
I'm just trying to get the details straight. And on the 911 calls, how many calls were made and how many by Pam?
I don't know how many calls were made. That's part of what I want to find out. And you've only been released one tape. What agency are you from? What's your name?
I'm with KNX.
KNX, your radio?
Yes.
Is that conservative radio?
It's just all news.
What's your name?
Claudia Piscata. So,
Okay.
He called at least once, and a
He called more than once. It is not. We're not saying the 15-year-old boy called. During the call, the 15-year-old was given the phone, had the phone from Mr. Thomas.
Okay, and when he called 911 to say, I need help, what was he saying? What was the gist of that?
We're investigating all of that, and
But
you.
given what you know,
Given what I know, I've said what I know, and I totally appreciate your questions. Thank
So
you.
you're saying that with the call that was released to the media, there may have been more calls?
There are more calls. There are many more calls. Yes. Can I go further to say that the call that you received was the call that leans more favorably to the police story. It puts them in a more favorable light. They intentionally gave you the version they wanted you to run with. That's why all of your questions are singled around him maybe being threatening or being on drugs, which we're not saying that he was. But that is why you were given that call instead of the other calls that came for the house that said other things, or the other statements that we believe are on tape that said, and by the way, don't shoot him.
Do you have any sense of how many total calls were made?
No, because I don't work there.
About
yeah.
the protesting, you said that you stand with the people who protested and everything.
I said that I stand with the idea that we need to have transparency.
Well, I just want to go off of that and ask you, what are you calling for in light of the protests? I mean, it's like been 5 days, I think, in San Diego, and in some of the other places it has turned violent. Do you have a word to say to protesters?
I want them to do what they feel is right. I don't want to be the protesters' moral conscience. But you know what? There are folks who called Martin Luther King an outside agitator. There are folks who said Rosa Parks should have went to jail since she didn't want to go to the back of the bus. And now we gave Martin Luther King a holiday. So sometimes what may seem drastic at the time may seem reasonably necessary in 10 years that benefit the idea. I'm by no means saying that I subscribe to everything a protester might do or you might show them doing. They may do something 30 days out of a month, and then on that last hour, someone blows up something of them doing something extreme. I'm not saying that I agree with everything protesters might do, but just like family members, I don't agree with some things my own mama says and does, but I love her and I would fight for her, so, you know.
Can you tell us why you had the knife under his armpit? What was the reason?
He was protecting his family.
Hey, Carrie, I understand that you said the person that...
I didn't answer that last part. I don't know if this gentleman is with you guys. Hi, can we speak a little bit later? Is that okay? Is that thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Nugent, I think. Okay, go ahead.
Legally speaking, what kind of a case is this for you? Wrongful death, excessive force, civil rights violations? Where do you proceed?
All of those fall under civil rights violations and are redressable in the federal district court. Okay, if you wrongfully kill someone, you know, there are state statutes that pertain to wrongful death, and there are federal violations for the taking of life and the battery and the feeling that they felt while they were being killed. People have a right to have their case heard, even if they're not here, through their family, and get compensated or get justice for the pain that they were feeling while they were being killed. And we want to get change too. They don't want anybody else to go through this. They want, and there's a young lady that you heard speaking out in the red hat. And Miss Jessica, they want more active teams to respond that are equipped with dealing with mental health issues, that are equipped, instead of looking at the persons as a potential nuisance to the community, let's look at them as someone, our brother and sister, that we need to help get over this hump that they're having. Everybody's got something the matter. We may not know what's going on with you guys. You guys might have a little something wrong. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll leave it there and put a pin in it.
Well, I just don't understand what that means.
You'll never understand.
May we hear from the family, Carrie?
I mean, if you put it out there, I just need to understand what that means. I don't want to mischaracterize it.
Well, then don't, ma'am.
But that's why I'm asking for clarification.
Yeah, we'll leave it there, and I'm sure more will come out later. But this is what we're trying to give you as much as we can give now and get out the family story now. And I appreciate your questions. I do. I don't want to shut you down, even if you're from a conservative. I'm just kidding.
Hey, Carrie, you had mentioned that the voice that we heard is a 15-year-old boy.
Yes.
I understand that, and I respect that. But have you spoken to the rest of the family?
Yes, of
as to
course.
whether or not there was drug use prior to the call?
Okay, let's go to the worst case scenario. Let's say he had just committed a violent felony. He had robbed a drugstore and ingested all of the drugs that they had in their possession. He is now at a residence. No one has been hurt, and no one is in imminent danger of being killed. Does the police have the right to kill that man or use excessive force? The answer is no. So what is in his body may give rise to an initial use to contain the situation. What we're saying is continue to contain the situation. Don't make the situation worse by kicking him, Mr. Nugent. Even if he's on drugs, you don't get to kick him in the head when there's 6 officers. You just don't. You don't get to do it. We have courts for that. If they had a reason to arrest him, then he would have been across the street and I would have represented him there. And then we would have prosecutors saying, hey, he did X, Y, Z. But you don't get the right to kick him all the way to jail. Even if we don't like what some people in sometimes folks feel that they should get curbside justice. Whoop his butt. He should have got his butt whooped for what he did. Well, we have a judicial system. The justice system says take them into custody using the least amount of force. That does not include kicks to the head. Let me be clear. Kicks to the head is not part of what the Pasadena police should be doing. They had 6 officers there. They could have controlled the scene. That rose to the level of excessive, no matter if he just robbed a bank.
Carrie, you and I know each other well. You know that none of us here as reporters would ever suggest improper use of force.
Of course. I know that. I'm just saying I want to make it clear to the folks who might suggest that.
And I also want to clarify probably what Claudia was saying. The reason he may have had a knife with a fire extinguisher, from what we were told, was that due to maybe his mental state, he felt he was in danger.
Yes, I think that's a fair Yes, Lolita, I think that's a fair characterization. Thank you for the. Is that okay, Claudia? Okay. Okay, if there are no more.
I want to hear.
I think that they all wanted a unified voice now, and they may choose to speak later.
Can we just have one person just talk to us about Reginald?
I think that there's going to be events later, possibly even this week, but later, and they will choose to speak. But they want to do everything with a unified voice, and I think that's admirable. Is there one last? I'm sorry. I know, Miss Lolita. I know, but you've heard them say that, and so that we're going to respect that today. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering about the kids' reaction to this, especially in light of having this step over.
The kids are traumatized, and they're going to need counseling, and they're going to be getting it as early as this week. They're traumatized. The kids are. It's fair to say the kids are traumatized. So we'll conclude there, and if anyone has any additional questions, you can feel free to call my office or email, and I can give that information later after we get the family out of this hot sun. Thanks so much, folks. And we'll go ahead. And if you guys want to answer that question, you can, Mr.
Are you guys children? Or?
Yes, children are here.
Everyone here is his children and his family.
Would anybody just be willing to say one?
Lolita, I like you, Lolita, but they have their right. Hey, little one.
We just want to make sure.
I know they said that earlier. Hi, how are you?
All right, you guys, well, that is the end of that press conference.